What is going on, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Behind Show. And it is now officially Super Bowl week, where the Bengals will take on the LA Rams in Super Bowl 56 in SoFi Stadium in the Rams' home stadium. It does not seem real that the Bengals are in the Super Bowl this season. It's one of those situations where you knew it was going to happen eventually, but the realization of it happening and actually happening that we're in it is just kind of surreal and crazy. And I'm kind of going to be answering some questions from my Instagram followers and my YouTube subscribers and stuff. Different questions throughout this week for us against the LA Rams. With the Super Bowl. This week it just is insane that it is so awesome that we are in the Super Bowl. And I saw a tweet the other day, and it was talking about with Bengal fans, like true Bengal fans, remember, the Ryan Fitzpatrick year. That was the year 2008. And that was one of the years when Carson Palmer, got injured. And, that was Ryan Fitz tragic. He was horrible. Some people think, he is Fitz magic. But, I remember that Fitzpatrick year a lot. That was one of my first years being a Bengals fan. And the Bengals played the Baltimore Ravens in Cincinnati. I actually went to that game. It wasn't my first Bengal game I went to, but it was one of my first ones. And one of my first regular season games. And, I was little at the time. And, the Bengals weren't good, obviously, with Palmer being injured. And Fitzpatrick was a starter at the time. And, we were getting killed. Fitzpatrick was playing horrible. And the whole game, it seemed like people were chanting for Jordan Palmer to play instead of Ryan Fitzpatrick. And it's weird because I was like 8, I think, at the time. And, people were chanting Jordan, which is kind of, when I was little, I thought that was kind of cool. Even though people weren't cheering for me, it was cool, hearing my name basically being yelled throughout the entire stadium. So towards the end of the game, with a couple minutes to go, Jordan Palmer finally comes in, and his very first pass attempt was a pick six. So, that kind of just shows you how bad that year was in 2008. We ended up losing that game 34-3. It's a very embarrassing game to lose against Baltimore. But, that was way back in 2008. This is a 2021 season. We were playing in a Super Bowl. It's so weird how much, things can change. Especially when you look at, like, just a couple years ago, we had 2 wins. We've had 25 losses the last 2 years. Now we're playing in a Super Bowl. Does not seem real. So I want to answer some questions here. I was asked on Instagram and on YouTube. So let's go ahead and get started. Do you consider to get back Vontez Burfict? I don't know why you would even consider that. Vontez Burfict is probably my favorite Bengals player of all time. I think it's really weird and strange that Bengal fans don't like Burfict. I think he's one of the most underrated Bengal players ever. And if he would have played 30 years ago, he would be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He just played in the wrong era. But I don't know why you would even consider bringing Burfict back. That makes no sense. From the start, with Zach Taylor's coaching staff, it did not appear that they want anything to do with Burfict. And, they cut him in Taylor's first offseason. And, Pratt's done really well as of late. Logan Wilson's had his best year ever. Pratt's even has his best year ever. Some of these guys have stepped up, like Marcus Bailey. And I don't think, you would sign a distraction like Burfict in the biggest game of every single player's career for Cincinnati. It makes zero sense to me. I don't even know why that would, come up. Next question here is, what do you think will be the difference maker in the Super Bowl? Well, obviously there's a couple of different things, and lots of people probably have different answers. Some would say, if they think the Rams will win, it'll be their defensive line. And people who think the Bengals will win, they'll probably say, maybe Chase or Burrow, escaping out of the pocket and stuff like that. But a difference maker to me, I would say, that's kind of it's a good question. I would say just, the Bengals wide receiver core as itself, because, with Jalen Ramsey probably going to be, on Chase the majority of the game, you still have T. Higgins and you still have Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd might not be better than Jamar Chase, but I think, honestly, if you look at Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd, Out of those three, Boyd might not be the best, but I think he's the most reliable. And I would not be shocked at all if Tyler Boyd were to have a pretty big game in the Super Bowl this Sunday. So I would probably go with just the wide receiver core in general, because even if you take Chase out of the equation, you have these guys like Higgins and Boyd who can step up, like we've seen time and time again that they're capable of doing. As we continue here, another question was asked, how will the offensive line deal with the Rams pass rush? To me, I mean, obviously it's not going to be an easy task. Jackson Carman is expected to start, in the Super Bowl. He did not start this past week against Kansas City in the AFC Championship game. But you look at it, and it's going to be, hard, but I think we can, maybe not give up a ton of sacks against LA if we have right play calls and you kind of have really nice play calls. For example, look at Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon had over 20 rushing attempts in the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs, and we were only sacked one time. The offensive line was still bad at times, but at the same time, you look at it, when you give Mixon the ball and more rushing attempts, you look at the stats when he has 20 rushing attempts or more in a game, the Bengals are much more likely to win, and it also takes away the chances of Burrow getting sacked. So to me, it's going to be hard to deal with it, but I think, something like that can easily, be stopped to some degree. And that's kind of, we know what this next question here, how do we stop the Rams defensive line? Kind of like I was saying, give Mixon the ball to take some pressure off Burrow. I mean, Burrow is great under pressure. Don't get me wrong, but you don't want him throwing 50, 55 times in the Super Bowl where he has a chance to get sacked a lot of times, because, the more passing attempts he has is more likely he's going to get sacked. And we saw that last year, and that's what ultimately led to him getting injured against Washington. And also, when you look at Mixon, I really noticed Mixon, catching quite a few catches out of the backfield this past 5-6 weeks or so. And I don't think it's a coincidence when you look at the last 5 or 6 weeks. Our only loss, was against Cleveland. That's when our starters weren't playing. I'm not really going to call that a loss, because we really didn't care if we won or lost that game. But, when you look at Mixon, when, he gets the ball, 3, 4, 5 catches a game, the Bengals, win percentage is much higher than when he only has like 0, 1, or 2 catches. So that's something else. Some of these quick screens to Mixon. We saw a 41-yard running back screen to Perine for a touchdown against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. I don't want to see Samaje Perine on third down at all in this game in the Super Bowl. I don't want to see him getting a single target. I do not think Perine is that good. I think Chris Evans needs to take the place of Samaje Perine. Chris Evans is basically what Samaje Perine is, but for whatever reason, the Bengals coaching staff is having Perine play in a perfect opportunity for Chris Evans. I don't think it would be a bad idea to have Chris Evans out there some in the backfield, maybe catching some catches. I know he's not really played much. I know we're expecting a lot from a guy who really hasn't played much this year, but I would much rather have him catching some balls out of the backfield than Samaje Perine. So how do we stop the Rams defensive line? I would say short passes, some screens to Mixon, Evans, Perine, whoever the running back is, and also give the ball to Mixon a decent amount. I think that would be a pretty decent idea. As we continue here, let me see here. This is from Donato Frank. I know he's a longtime follower. I appreciate him asking some questions. I know he's been following me for years. How many yards do the Bengals hold Cooper Kupp and Odell Beckham Jr. to? Don't let ESPN fool you about Odell Beckham Jr. Odell Beckham Jr., even though he has, really, been great with the Rams, much better than he was with Cleveland, he is still overrated. He's only had one 100-yard game with the Rams, in the past, 10 games or so. He's good, but I honestly still think he's a little bit overrated. And, even going back to his days against Cleveland, we were able to shut him down. So I don't think Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be an issue at all. You look at Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, all three of those receivers, in my opinion, I think those three receivers are easily better than Odell Beckham Jr. So I don't think we have to worry about him too much, especially, with Chidobe Awuzie going to be on Odell Beckham Jr. And it's weird because, people talk about, oh, Chidobe Awuzie and Cooper Kupp. It's going to be a great matchup. I don't think Awuzie is going to be on Kupp nearly as much as people think because Cooper Kupp is a slot receiver. Mike Hilton will mainly be on Cooper Kupp if he's in the slot because he has over 1,000 yards in the slot this season. That's nearly 400 or 500 more than anybody else this year. So I definitely think if I would have to guess, Odell Beckham Jr., let's say 50 yards. Kupp, even on an off day, it seems like this off game this season for Cooper Kupp, he still manages to get like 70 or 80 yards. I'm going to say 90 or 95, something like that. I was probably about 150 combined for those two guys. And I think it's really important for us to hold Cooper Kupp to under 100 receiving yards. When you look at the Rams' record, when Cooper Kupp has more than 100 receiving yards, it is incredible. I think it's they have like over 10 wins. It is very, very impressive. So I think that's kind of the number that we need to really target to not let him go over that mark. And we have a really good chance of winning. So I would say about 150 combined for Kupp and Odell Beckham Jr. Next question here. If you could choose one former Bengal that has left in the past 5 years to play in the Super Bowl for us, who would it be? I feel like this question was purposely designed just for me to say one particular person. And it would be really crazy for me not to say this guy. But, obviously Andrew Whitworth. It would make our offensive line, so much better. And he's really the only guy the last 5 years that we have so significantly, lost, and we could really use him. So I would definitely say Whitworth. And it's really weird, us in the Super Bowl, the Bengals against Whitworth. And this more than likely could be very well Andrew Whitworth's last game in the NFL. Definitely a future Hall of Famer. As we continue here, let's see. Trey3257. What are your pregame rituals? I don't really have any pregame rituals. That's a nice question though. I don't know. The past couple of weeks, I will say, the Raiders game I was able to go to, but the Titans game and the Chiefs game, I've been sitting in one particular seat the entire game, and I have my Tyler Boyd jersey on right now, and I have my Boyd jersey, and I also have my custom-made sweatshirts that I wear over my jersey. I've done that the past 2 weeks. I've sat in the same chair the entire game with my Boyd jersey and my little sweatshirt on over top of it. And we won the last two games. So I'm definitely going to be doing that in the Super Bowl. So hopefully, that good luck charm could, help us win against the Rams. It's one of those situations where you don't want to stop now because, you don't know if it's a jinx or not. But so you're going to keep on doing it. The same person asked another question here. Do you think CJ Uzama will end up playing in the Super Bowl? If you were to ask me, right after the Chiefs game in the AFC Championship game, I would have said absolutely not. But now it appears that there's a decent chance that he's going to play. Taylor said, it looks good for him. Uzama said he's not going to miss the biggest game of his career. So I would say, there's a pretty good chance Uzama is probably going to, suit up there and play in the Super Bowl, which is really, helpful for this Bengals offense, because it's really weird because Uzama, he's not going to be one of those guys who gets you 100 yards a game and 2 touchdowns like a Chase or Higgins or even a Boyd, but just 40 yards, 50 yards a game, something like that, kind of slightly taking the pressure off of a guy like Jamar Chase. If Chase is double teamed, Uzama can get a 5-10 yards here and there, can kind of take the pressure off of Chase, which I think is very helpful. And it's something else, Uzama is one of the biggest leaders on the team. It would be, really bad if he wasn't out there to go for us on Sunday. So I would say Uzama will end up playing on the Super Bowl, which is crazy because, I would definitely not have thought that a couple weeks ago. This question here, let me see. If Uzama didn't play Thaddeus Moss or Tyler Eifert, I have never understood the Bengals' obsession over Thaddeus Moss. I know some Bengal fans obsess over Auden Tate, but I feel like the difference between Auden Tate is that we've seen his potential. We know he's good. Thaddeus Moss has a Hall of Fame dad who's one of the best wide receivers of all time. That's the main reason why pretty much anybody knows who he is. If Thaddeus Moss, if his dad was not Randy Moss, not nearly as many people would like him, not nearly as many people would know who he was, and not nearly as many people would, be talking about his potential and stuff like that. He is so slow. He's like slow as molasses. He's slower than Preston Brown in coverage, and that tells you how slow he is. We had to relive that, a couple years ago. But if I had to pick one, I mean, I guess Eifert, even though, he's not really been with anybody. But since Uzama is, going to probably end up playing, this question, probably doesn't really matter, I would guess. Let me see here. Another player, possibly, returning, which is, highly unlikely. I know lots of people talked about it. I kind of talked about it last week on my show with Frank LaPlaca, the unofficial Bengals podcast. And we talked about it really a couple of times, with will Geno Atkins be returning? There were some talks there for a little while. And I think, it kind of made some sense after the Bengals won against the Chiefs. If they were to do it like the day after the AFC Championship game, a day or two after, I thought it would make quite a bit of sense to get some, veteran leadership and a guy, a defensive tackle who's had experience, instead of some of these guys like Kerr and Square who've kind of been brought up from the practice squad, who are basically, kind of no names and nobodies who do not have a big, contributor to this team. But at this point, it makes no sense to sign Atkins. I feel like if it would have happened, it would have happened a week ago. It would be kind of strange to see Geno Atkins signing with the Bengals like 6 days before the Super Bowl when they could have signed him like 6 months ago. And it's something else. It's very weird how Geno Atkins was never signed throughout the season, which is crazy because if you look at his stats and look at his play, in my opinion, I think is a future Hall of Famer. And as one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL the past decade. So I definitely do not think Geno Atkins will be returning to the Bengals. As we continue here, when was your hate for the Steelers solidified? Well, that's kind of a good question. I'm just thinking so many memories at the top of my head. I mean, obviously, you had the playoff game. You have when Kevin Huber got hurt, the blindside block. When Keith Rivers, when he got hurt real bad. When Reggie Nelson and Mike Tomlin about got into it on a primetime game years ago. I really don't know. I'm not going to say the 2005, playoff game, because honestly, I wasn't really a Bengal fan at that time. Like I said earlier, I was kind of a Bengal fan starting in 2007, 2008. So I wouldn't say the playoff game. I don't know. I mean, I guess one of those, whichever one was the earliest. I really don't know at the top of my head. But I mean, the Steelers always has been, always will the team, always has been, and always will be the team I hate the most in the NFL. And it's so awesome that we have beat them 3 times in a row now. Let's see here. There's only about 1 or 2 more questions left. Who's your favorite Bengals player, not including Burrow? Definitely Boyd. Been able to meet him after a game or two a couple years ago. He's a really, really nice guy. Even if you were to include Burrow, I would still say it's probably a toss-up. Probably a tie between Joe Burrow and Tyler Boyd. I really like Boyd. I think he's extremely underrated. Never gets the credit that he deserves and is so reliable when he needs to make a crucial catch. So I would say Tyler Boyd for my favorite player, not including Joe Burrow. I think this is the last question here. This is from the Scorpion King 72. What makes this team different from the team 2 years in the past? The past 2 seasons. It's interesting. I think it's obvious. It's Joe Burrow. Obviously, Jamar Chase, I think, has a little bit to do with it due to his chemistry with Joe Burrow. But, I mean, when you look at people, there's a reason people say the most important position in the NFL and in football in general is the quarterback. Because look how crappy we were, just how bad and horrendous we were when we had Andy Dalton as our quarterback. And then when you look at Joe Burrow, there was just so much hope, and him extending plays, and his football IQ was off the charts, and him just being phenomenal. Play after play after play, making ridiculous plays that we would never in a million years see Andy Dalton make in his lifetime. Even if you look at this season, this is Joe Burrow's first full season, and it is still light years ahead of Andy Dalton's best season, 2015. So when it comes to what makes this team different this year from the past 2 seasons, I don't get how anybody could possibly not say Joe Burrow. It is clearly Joe Burrow. It has so much to do with him. And also, has a little bit to do with some of these guys we signed, in the offseason, and some of the guys we drafted, like a Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Evan McPherson, And these guys we signed, like Trey Hendrickson, who's been phenomenal and has proved me wrong so many times this season. Von Bell, Mike Hilton, some of these guys who've really helped. DJ Reader, I would definitely say Burrow, but I wouldn't say it's fully on him. Just we have so much more experienced players and players who are having fun while winning and just seem like they want to be in Cincinnati, which I don't really think could have been said 2 years ago in Zach Taylor's first season. That really kind of about does it, for this video, answering some questions here for my followers and subscribers. It is so crazy that this week is the Super Bowl and the Bengals are playing in it against the LA Rams. Tomorrow, I believe, scheduled Frank LaPlaca from the Unofficial Bengals podcast, or Cincy Bengals Pod from on Instagram will be joining me. We'll be talking about that. Wednesday, I think Stripe Hype, Cincy Stripe Hype Bengals, Blake Jude will be joining me there. Have some other videos more than likely planned for this week. But that really about does it. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. And I will see you all next time on the